What happens when one of Hollywood's nicest guys finally reaches his breaking point on live television? It only took 35 seconds of one host's disrespectful comments for Keanu Reeves to do something he's never done before: walk off a major talk show, leaving the audience in complete shock and the host scrambling to save face. Before we get into this absolutely wild moment, make sure you hit that subscribe button right now, because we're pulling back the curtain on Hollywood's dark side, exposing entitled celebrities and their shocking behavior the cameras never showed you. We've got the raw footage they don't want you to see, and you won't want to miss a single reveal. Drop a comment below and let us know what you think about this outrageous behavior. Now, let's dive into what really went down. The morning started like any other episode of The View. The audience was buzzing with excitement, cameras were rolling, and the hosts were ready to welcome one of the biggest movie stars on the planet. Keanu Reeves was there to promote his latest film, and everyone expected it to be a fun, lighthearted interview. After all, Keanu is known for being humble, kind, and respectful to everyone he meets. He's the guy who gives up his seat on the subway, who takes pay cuts so crew members can get better wages, who stops to talk to fans on the street. This was supposed to be easy, but Behar had other plans. From the moment Keanu walked onto that stage, something felt off. The audience gave him a standing ovation, cheering and clapping as he waved and smiled that genuine Keanu smile. He shook hands with all the hosts, took his seat, and the interview began. The first few questions were normal enough. They asked about his new movie, about his training for the action scenes, about working with the director. Keanu answered each question thoughtfully, giving detailed responses, making the audience laugh with his self-deprecating humor. Then Behar decided to change the tone completely. "So Keanu," she said, leaning forward with a smirk on her face, "I have to ask you something that I think everyone's been wondering. You've been in Hollywood for decades now, and you're still doing these action movies. Don't you think it's time to, grow up a little? Do something more serious?" The audience went quiet. You could feel the tension immediately. The other hosts exchanged uncomfortable glances. Keanu's smile faded slightly, but he remained polite. "Well, I love what I do," he said calmly. "Action films allow me to tell stories about characters who face incredible challenges. There's a lot of depth to these roles if you look beyond the surface." Joy laughed, but it wasn't a friendly laugh. It was dismissive, almost mocking. "Depth? In an action movie?" she said, looking at the other hosts like she was waiting for them to join in on the joke. "Come on, Keanu. You're basically playing the same character over and over again. Guy with a gun, guy who knows kung fu, guy who's sad about something. It's not exactly Shakespeare, is it?" The audience gasped. A few people even booed. This wasn't playful teasing. This was straight up disrespectful. Keanu sat back in his chair, his jaw tightening slightly. He was still trying to keep his composure, still trying to be the bigger person. "I think every role has value," he said, his voice steady but firmer now. "And the fans who connect with these films, they find meaning in them. That matters to me." Joy wasn't backing down. In fact, she was just getting started. "Oh, please," she said, waving her hand dismissively. "Let's be honest here. You're not doing this for the art. You're doing it for the paycheck. These movies make billions of dollars, and you're laughing all the way to the bank. At least admit that." Now, the other hosts were visibly uncomfortable. One of them tried to jump in and change the subject, but Joy kept going. "I mean, how much money does one person need?" she continued. "You've made more money than most people will see in 10 lifetimes, and you're still out here doing the same thing. Maybe it's time to step aside and let some younger actors have a chance. Don't you think?" Keanu's face remained calm, but you could see something shifting in his eyes. He wasn't angry. Not yet. But he was definitely done playing along. "I don't think my age or my success should determine whether I get to do what I love," he said quietly. "And I don't think it's fair to suggest that I'm taking opportunities away from anyone. There's room for everyone in this industry." Joy laughed again, that same condescending laugh that was starting to make everyone in the studio uncomfortable. "Room for everyone? That's cute," she said. "But let's talk about something else. Your personal life. You've been very private over the years, which I respect, I guess. But don't you think it's a little weird? You're almost 60 years old. You've never been married. You don't have kids. What's going on there? Are you afraid of commitment or something?" The audience audibly gasped. Even the camera operators looked shocked. This was crossing a major line. Asking about someone's deeply personal choices, their family planning, their relationship status in such a judgmental way, it was completely inappropriate. The other hosts immediately tried to intervene. "Joy, I don't think," one of them started to say. But Keanu held up his hand, signaling that it was okay. He was going to answer this himself. "My personal life is exactly that," he said, his voice still calm but with an edge to it now. "Personal. I've experienced loss that I wouldn't wish on anyone. I've had relationships that didn't work out. I've chosen to focus on my work and the people I care about. Those choices are mine to make, and I don't need to justify them to anyone." For a split second, it seemed like Joy might actually back off. The audience was completely silent, hanging on every word. Even she seemed to realize she'd pushed too far, but then, inexplicably, she kept going. "Oh, so you're playing the victim card now?" she said, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "Look, everyone's been through stuff, Keanu. That doesn't mean you get to hide from the world and pretend you're above it all. Maybe if you actually engaged with real life instead of living in your action movie fantasy world, you'd be a more interesting person." That was it. That was the moment. Keanu Reeves, the man who has spent his entire career being kind and gracious to everyone, who has never said a bad word about anyone, who has handled every difficult situation with grace, finally had enough. He stood up. Not quickly, not dramatically. He just calmly removed his microphone, set it down on the table, and stood up. "I came here to talk about my film," he said, his voice quiet but firm. "I didn't come here to be insulted or to have my personal life dissected by someone who doesn't know me. I've been respectful to you, and I expected the same in return." Clearly, that was too much to ask. Joy's face went pale. She realized what was happening, what she'd caused, and she immediately tried to backtrack. "Keanu, wait, I was just..." she stammered. "No," he said, cutting her off. "You weren't just anything. You were rude. You were dismissive of my work, my choices, and my life. And I don't have to sit here and take that from anyone." The audience started applauding. At first, it was just a few people. Then more and more joined in until the entire studio was clapping and cheering for Keanu. The other hosts looked mortified. The producers were probably losing their minds in the control room. And Joy Behar just sat there, speechless for maybe the first time in her life. Keanu turned to the audience and gave them a small wave and a genuine smile. Then he looked at the other hosts. "Thank you for having me," he said politely. "I'm sorry it had to end this way." And then he walked off the stage. Just like that. The cameras kept rolling, catching every second of the awkward silence that followed. Joy tried to make a joke, tried to brush it off like it was no big deal, but you could see the panic in her eyes. The other host tried to change the subject, tried to move on to the next segment, but the damage was done. One of the other hosts finally spoke up, her voice shaky. I think we need to take a quick break," she said, looking directly at the camera. But before they could cut to commercial, you could hear Joy's voice, quieter now, almost to herself. "I was just asking questions," she said defensively. "It's my job to ask questions." Another host turned to her, and even though her voice was low, the microphones picked it up. "There's asking questions, and then there's being cruel, Joy. That was cruel." The screen finally went to black as they cut to commercial, but the moment was already out there. The audience had seen it, the cameras had captured it, and there was no taking it back. When the show came back from commercial break, Joy had clearly been talked to by someone during the break. Her whole demeanor had changed. She looked uncomfortable, nervous even. The confidence and smugness from earlier were completely gone. "Before we continue," she said, reading carefully from notes that someone had obviously given her, "I want to address what just happened. If my questions came across as insensitive or disrespectful to Keanu Reeves, that was not my intention. I have great respect for him as an actor and as a person." But it was too late. The apology felt hollow, forced, like something the lawyers and producers had made her say. The audience wasn't buying it. Some people were even shaking their heads. The other hosts looked relieved that she'd at least said something, but you could tell they were still uncomfortable with the whole situation. The rest of the show was a disaster. The energy was completely off. The hosts stumbled through their remaining segments, and the audience participation was minimal. Nobody wanted to be there anymore. The incident had sucked all the air out of the room. What made this whole situation even more powerful was how Keanu handled it. He didn't yell. He didn't curse. He didn't throw anything or storm off in a rage. He simply stood up for himself with dignity and walked away. That's what made it so impactful. This wasn't some celebrity having a meltdown or throwing a diva fit. This was a genuinely good person who had been pushed past his limit by someone who should have known better. Think about what Joy Behar actually said during that interview. She dismissed his entire career, suggesting that action movies have no artistic value. She accused him of being greedy and only caring about money, despite the fact that Keanu is literally famous for being one of the most generous people in Hollywood. She told him he should step aside for younger actors, as if his age made him less valuable. And then, most disgustingly, she mocked his personal life, his choice not to marry or have children, and brought up his past trauma in the most insensitive way possible. Any one of those comments would have been inappropriate. All of them together? It was a masterclass in how not to conduct an interview. And here's the thing that really gets me about this whole situation. Joy Behar is a professional. She's been doing this for years. She knows how to interview people. She knows where the lines are. She chose to cross them anyway, whether it was for ratings, for attention, or just because she thought she could get away with it. She made a conscious choice to disrespect her guest. Keanu Reeves has been in the public eye for over 30 years. In all that time, there are virtually no stories of him being difficult, rude, or unkind to anyone. Crew members love working with him. Co-stars rave about his professionalism. Fans share countless stories of him being generous with his time and attention. This is not a person who walks off interviews. This is not a person who creates drama. The fact that he felt compelled to leave speaks volumes about how bad the situation really was. Let's break down exactly what happened in those final 35 seconds before Keanu stood up. Joy had just made her comment about him playing the victim card and living in a fantasy world. Keanu sat there for a moment, clearly processing what she just said. You could see him take a deep breath. Then he looked at Joy, really looked at her, like he was trying to understand why she was doing this. "Do you treat all your guests this way?" he asked quietly. "Or is there something specific about me that makes you think it's okay to speak to me like this?" Joy's face flushed red. She wasn't expecting him to push back, to actually question her behavior. "I'm just being honest," she said, but her voice wavered. "I'm known for being honest. That's what people like about me." Keanu nodded slowly, like he was considering her words. "There's a difference between being honest and being hurtful," he said. "Honesty without kindness is just cruelty, and I don't think cruelty is something to be proud of." That's when he stood up. That's when he removed his microphone. And that's when he delivered his calm, dignified statement about not being there to be insulted. The audience's reaction was immediate and overwhelming. They weren't just clapping for Keanu. They were showing their disapproval of Joy's behavior. Some people were standing. Some were cheering. Some were even shouting their support. It was a complete repudiation of how the interview had been conducted. As Keanu walked toward the exit, one of the other hosts actually got up from her seat and followed him a few steps, like she wanted to apologize on behalf of the show. You could hear her voice, though not clearly, saying something like, "I'm so sorry," or "Please don't go." But Keanu just gave her a kind smile and a gentle pat on the shoulder, as if to say it wasn't her fault, and continued walking. The camera stayed on Joy's face for what felt like an eternity. You could see her going through multiple emotions. First there was shock, like she couldn't believe he'd actually left. Then there was embarrassment, as she realized the audience was against her. Then there was anger, like she was mad at him for making her look bad, even though she'd done it to herself. And finally, there was something that looked almost like regret, though whether she was regretting her words or just regretting getting caught is anyone's guess. One of the producers must have been screaming in everyone's earpieces because suddenly all the hosts were talking at once, trying to fill the dead air, trying to move on to anything else. But it was chaos. Nobody knew what to say. How do you recover from something like that? How do you continue a show after your guest has walked off because of your co-host's behavior? The stage manager was visible in the background, frantically gesturing to the camera operators. The audience was still buzzing, still talking amongst themselves. Some people were pulling out their phones, probably already texting their friends or posting on social media about what they'd just witnessed. This was going to be everywhere within minutes, and everyone in that studio knew it. Joy made one more attempt to regain control of the situation. "Well, I guess some people can't handle a real conversation," she said, trying to sound casual, trying to make it seem like Keanu was the problem. But one of the other hosts immediately shut that down. "Joy, stop," she said firmly. "Just stop talking. This isn't on him. This is on you." The audience applauded again. Even the crew members, who were supposed to remain neutral and invisible, were nodding in agreement. Joy opened her mouth like she was going to argue, then closed it again. She knew she was defeated. She knew she'd messed up badly, and there was no spinning this in her favor. The segment producer came out onto the stage during what was supposed to be a commercial break, but the cameras were still rolling, capturing everything. You could see her talking urgently to the hosts, her hands moving rapidly as she explained what they needed to do next. Joy was nodding, but she looked defensive, her arms crossed over her chest. The other host looked sympathetic to the producer, clearly agreeing with whatever damage control plan was being laid out. What's fascinating about this entire incident is how it reveals the power dynamics in celebrity interviews. Hosts often feel entitled to ask whatever they want, to push whatever boundaries they want, because they have the platform and the audience. But guests are people too. They have feelings, limits, and the right to be treated with respect. Just because someone agrees to come on your show doesn't mean they've signed up to be your punching bag. Keanu Reeves showed everyone watching that it's okay to stand up for yourself, even in a professional setting, even when cameras are rolling, even when there might be consequences. He demonstrated that you can set boundaries firmly without being aggressive or cruel yourself. He proved that taking the high road doesn't mean letting people walk all over you. The fact that this happened on live television made it even more powerful. There was no editing it out, no reshooting the segment, no PR team spinning the narrative before it got out. This was raw, real, and immediate. Millions of people watched it happen in real time, and millions more would see the clips within hours. Joy Behar had built a career on being outspoken, on saying things that other people might think but wouldn't say out loud. That's her brand, her selling point. But there's a line between being outspoken and being unnecessarily cruel, and she crossed it spectacularly. She forgot, or maybe never learned, that being a good interviewer means bringing out the best in your guests, not tearing them down for entertainment. The other hosts, to their credit, seemed genuinely mortified by what had happened. They knew it was wrong. They knew Joy had gone too far. And in those moments after Keanu left, when they had to figure out how to continue the show, you could see them distancing themselves from her behavior, making it clear that they didn't condone what had been said. This wasn't just about one bad interview. It was about respect, dignity, and how we treat each other. It was about the expectation that celebrities should just sit there and take abuse because they're rich and famous. It was about the toxic culture of some talk shows where humiliating guests is considered good television. Keanu's walk-off was a rejection of all of that. And the beautiful thing? He did it without being mean. He didn't insult Joy back. He didn't call her names. He didn't say anything that could be used against him later. He simply stated his boundaries, explained why he was leaving, and left. That's class. That's dignity. That's how you stand up for yourself without stooping to someone else's level. The audience's overwhelming support for Keanu showed that people are tired of this kind of behavior from talk show hosts. They don't want to see guests being bullied or belittled. They want real conversations, interesting questions, and respectful dialogue. Joy's approach might have worked in the past, might have gotten laughs or gasps from audiences before, but this time it backfired completely. As the show finally went to its planned commercial break, you could still hear commotion in the studio. Audience members were talking loudly, some sounding angry, others sounding supportive of Keanu. The energy had completely shifted from excited anticipation at the beginning of the interview to uncomfortable tension now. When they came back from commercial, they had completely restructured the show. They skipped segments, brought out different guests earlier than planned, and basically did everything they could to move past what had happened. But you could see it in everyone's faces. The hosts looked shaken. The audience looked distracted. Even the crew seemed off their game. One moment had derailed the entire production. Joy attempted to participate in the rest of the show like nothing had happened, but her usual spark was gone. She was subdued, careful with her words, clearly aware that she was on thin ice. The other hosts weren't engaging with her the way they normally would. There was a distance there that hadn't existed before. This whole incident raises important questions about entertainment culture. Why do we accept hosts being cruel to guests? Why is it considered good television when someone is made uncomfortable or upset? When did we decide that respect and kindness were boring, and mockery and humiliation were entertaining? Keanu Reeves walked off that stage, and in doing so, made a statement that resonated far beyond that one interview. He reminded everyone that being kind and being strong aren't opposites, that you can be gentle and still have boundaries. That politeness doesn't mean accepting mistreatment. The final few minutes of the show were painful to watch. Everyone was going through the motions, saying their lines, but there was no energy, no joy, no connection. The incident had poisoned the whole atmosphere. When the show finally ended and the credits rolled, you could see the host practically fleeing the stage, eager to escape the uncomfortable situation. What happened on The View wasn't just a celebrity moment or a dramatic walk-off. It was a masterclass in dignity, a lesson in self-respect, and a reminder that everyone deserves to be treated with basic human decency, regardless of their fame, their wealth, or their career choices. Keanu Reeves didn't need to stay in that chair and endure Joy Behar's disrespect. He didn't owe her or the show anything beyond what he'd already given, which was his time and his willingness to participate. When that basic courtesy wasn't returned, he made the only choice that made sense. He left. And in leaving, he showed us all something important. He showed us that it's okay to walk away from toxicity. It's okay to refuse to participate in your own humiliation. It's okay to demand better treatment, even from people who think their position gives them the right to treat you poorly. The contrast between Keanu's grace and Joy's hostility couldn't have been more stark. His calm, measured responses to her increasingly aggressive questions showed a level of emotional maturity that was impressive to witness. Even when he finally decided to leave, he did so without drama, without insults, without trying to hurt her the way she'd tried to hurt him. That's the mark of a truly good person, not someone who never gets upset or never reaches their limit, but someone who, even in their worst moment, even when they've been pushed too far, still manages to maintain their integrity and their kindness. So when you think about this incident, remember that it's not really about a celebrity walking off a talk show. It's about human dignity. It's about respect. It's about knowing your worth and refusing to let anyone make you feel small, no matter who they are or what platform they have. Keanu Reeves taught us all something that day, and the lesson had nothing to do with movies or fame or Hollywood. It had everything to do with how we treat each other and what we should accept from others. Make sure you drop a comment below telling us what you think about Joy's behavior and whether you think Keanu did the right thing by walking off. And don't forget to subscribe because we're always bringing you the truth about what really happens behind the scenes in Hollywood. We're exposing the entitled behavior, the shocking moments, and the raw reality that the mainstream media won't show you. Hit that subscribe button now so you never miss another explosive reveal.